It is the Bleav in Texans podcast brought to you by FanDuel. The Texans are 4 days into the free agency period. I include Monday and Tuesday into this whole first week of free agency because so many deals are agreed to and sometimes upheld, unless you're the Ravens. But I thought it would be a good time to reflect on the 16 moves the Texans have made, including trades during free agency that are most notable and that could have a long-term impact on the Texans. And then give them a midterm grade, knowing that there's still time for them to sign more offensive linemen or make more trades. Last year, or 2 years ago in 2024, the first aggressive moves in free agency for the Texans were made on a Thursday. So as we sit here at midday on a Thursday, there's still time for, in 2024, they signed Danielle Hunter and they traded for Joe Mixon. Those are big deals. But I want to go through these moves, and I'm going to break it into three different categories. There's the headline moves, there's the supporting moves, and there's the quiet depth moves. Right now at FanDuel, they still have the Texans at a 9.5, so nothing in free agency has moved them up or down. It's been a pretty good bet to go over 9.5 these last few years on the Texans. I do think that the fact that the defense is going to be good as long as DeMeco Ryans is in charge and they don't have really ridiculously bad injury luck. I always feel really good about going over 9.5. As far as the headline grabbing moves, and I'm not doing this chronologically or anything, but the Titus Howard trade, right? That was a big deal. That's a guy that's been with this team forever. They trade him away for a 5th round pick, and he ends up getting the deal that he wants in Cleveland for an amount that the Texans weren't willing to pay him. And this was going to be one that was very volatile in terms of how it looked, depending on what the Texans do to fill in the blanks. As of right now, I like the Braden Smith signing, but it's hard to look at the Texans' offensive line and say that they're remarkably or notably or better at all than they were last year at the end of the season, given the questions on the interior offensive line. The David Montgomery trade, which happened right at about the same time, obviously very notable as well. The Texans gave up what you could basically calculate as a 4th round pick for a running back that comes in who's getting up there in age, but you've got him on a cost-controlled contract. He's going to cost you $6 million this year. His money isn't guaranteed next year. And I'm cool with this, partly because I like David Montgomery a lot. Am I nervous that he's an older running back? Of course I am. But he gives you a certain swarm quality and an element to your game of physicality on offense that you just don't have from enough players on offense. Joe Mixon later on is released. I didn't include him in the moves because I felt like that was almost a foregone conclusion. Is he a replacement directly for Joe Mixon? No, but are we talking about a healthy Joe Mixon or a mysterious lower leg injury that he might never recover from? He's 100% better than that version of Joe Mixon. So I like the David Montgomery trade, especially because you don't have to pay him as much as you'd pay a Kenneth Walker, as much as you'd pay a Travis Etienne. Look, both those guys, like those guys, awesome players. They're not on that same level of a Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry that we saw a couple of years ago. So I'm 100% okay with this, and it doesn't preclude the Texans from drafting a running back in the draft, and I think he's the perfect complement to Woody Marks. So that move I like. And the final grade on all of these that I'm going to give at the end of this, the midterm grade, really going to be, we got to take the sum total into account. None of these moves individually is necessarily bad or good unless they don't address every improvement the Texans need to make. The Braden Smith signing from a couple days ago, 2 years, up to $25 million. The first thing that I see people writing about this is, hey, this is a great signing because he was probably the second best offensive tackle. Well, he was one of the top 5 offensive tackles available in free agency. It's funny because ESPN had him as their 8th best free agent overall. Then you go over to CBS Sports and they've got him as their 38th best free agent or something, or maybe even lower than that. Like whatever rankings or metrics they're using, I think he's a really, really good fit for what the Texans want to do. And we're going to talk about swarm-worthy offensive players. If you have to compare Braden Smith to Titus Howard, Braden Smith is a better and more physical run blocker than Titus Howard was. I'm not sitting here saying that he's a better player than Titus Howard or anything. But then the other question is, okay, the versatility that Titus Howard had, his ability to play right tackle, left guard, right guard. That was just last year. He's also played left tackle. He's played every position except center. That's extreme versatility. I don't know if Braden Smith has that extreme versatility, but he can definitely go down and play guard. And that's been a topic of debate amongst people right now is, hey, is he even, are the Texans planning on playing him at left guard, or are they planning on him playing at right tackle? Personally, I think the Texans probably don't genuinely know exactly where he's going to play this year. And people hate uncertainty. I get it. But I think if they can address the interior offensive line, if they find a guard that they feel good about, they sign in free agency. Maybe Joel Bitonio decides not to retire. Maybe it ends up being Wyatt Teller. Maybe it's Kevin Zeitler. I don't know. But if the Texans get somebody that they like at left guard, then Braden Smith obviously is going to be a right tackle. If for whatever reason they're not able to get that free agent and they don't draft a guard or an interior offensive lineman in the first round that they feel good about who earns a starting spot, I think they probably would be comfortable moving Braden Smith down to guard. But I'm anticipating the Texans are going to make some kind of a stab at left guard. I don't think they expect to go into the season saying, yeah, we're leaning on Trent Brown starting 17 games plus the postseason, because Trent Brown does not have a great track record of staying healthy. But the Braden Smith signing, in terms of how he plays the game of football, he's very strong. He's very physical. He very much embraces run blocking. He's an adequate pass protector. He's a solid starter in the NFL. I like the signing, and I like that he's half the cost of what the Browns are going to be paying Titus Howard. And you get the sense that Titus Howard didn't want to stick around and just either see what happens or just extend by 1 year. So I thought the sum total of those two, the Braden Smith signing combined with the Titus Howard trade and getting the 5th round pick in return, I'm very, very happy with the way that played out, as long as they continue to build on the offensive line. The Ed Ingram signing, 3 years, $37.5 million. This is the one I'm most nervous about. And it's because they gave him quality starter money for a guy that played really well as a run blocker this year, but who has serious question marks in pass protection. I tried to explain this on the radio this morning, and because I'm trying not to sit on the fence on this one or paint a negative as a positive or vice versa. I think the perception of Ed Ingram as a pass protector is worse than it should be, because some of his bad days in pass protection or his bad reps were when he gave up really quick pressure, notably against the Chiefs, which is the first thing any of you guys bring up. And I get it. I 100% agree with you. There were some reps in pass protection that were really, really bad. But on the sum total of it all, it wasn't as bad as those kind of linger in your memory. But quick pressure is the worst kind of pressure, obviously. You don't have to be a football expert to know that. You know it with your eyeballs. The thing that leads to some of those quick pressures is this. He's pretty aggressive. So he's very swarmy. That's why he's a good run blocker. There's times versus the better pass rushers where he's going on the attack. He's short setting him. He's quick setting him. He's trying to get his hands on Chris Jones. That's a dicey proposition against the really good defensive tackles, because they anticipate it. They wipe your hands and they're boom, back into the backfield. The thing about it that I find encouraging is that's a matter of strategy and judgment and experience. And I think that Cole Popovich and working with Ed Ingram can improve on that. He's very physically capable of good pass protection. He's just got to refine his strategy and his technique on game day versus different opponents. But it's still a question mark. So this is the one that the amount of money they paid him is a pretty hefty vote of confidence for a guy who I think still has to improve some things on the pass protection side of things. Last two headline moves, Danielle Hunter and his extension. Look, he was going to be on this team this year regardless, but I like tacking on an extra year to his contract, adding an extra $40.1 million and a huge, huge guarantee. That becomes headline worthy just because of the sheer sum of the contract, but I think it's 100% money well spent. I think that Danielle Hunter's willingness to just keep tweaking his contract year by year, this is the second year in a row he's added 1 year to his deal. That's a really good thing to have on a team, because you've got one of the best edge defenders in the league who's on a known cost-controlled contract. It's a known quantity. It's a lot of money. But if he all of a sudden starts to decline because of his age, you're not on the hook for the future 2 or 3 years of a 4-year extension. And that's the thing. You think about the Von Miller contract in Buffalo or various older pass rushers who have signed long-term deals. It rarely works out and it ends up biting you in the end. So I like that Danielle Hunter is willing to do that. And by the way, Danielle Hunter right now on FanDuel is plus 50,000, plus 50,000 to be the NFL MVP. So if you think that a defensive end has a good chance of winning if you're a defensive end, good luck. No matter what you do, you could have 30 sacks. Good luck winning the MVP in the NFL. Not just defensive MVP. Sorry, did I say defensive MVP? Overall MVP. CJ Stroud's at plus 5,500 right now. So if you're feeling like, okay, CJ, they do the right things around you, I'm going to monitor free agency and see if they get you some severely upgraded help on the offensive line. And I like everything else. He's at plus 5,500 right now. The last headline grabbing one that I would say, and this probably wasn't literally a big headline thing, but it was to me, damn it, was Sheldon Rankins, just because he was the one returning starter from last year that you might be nervous about losing. They signed him to 2 years, $12 million guaranteed. Notable partly because this is the third time he's signed with the Texans as a free agent, or at least he was a looming free agent. So this was the first time back in 2023. Then he went off to the Bengals. Then he comes back, plays way better than he had the year before with the Bengals. Then he almost hit free agency this year, and the Texans re-signed Sheldon Rankins. The consistency on the defense amongst 10 starters that were a top 2 defense in the league last year, I like this signing a lot for that reason. In the next category, we'll get into your Reed Blankenship type signings, because these weren't necessarily headline moves, but these were supporting moves, things that add to the milieu, whether it's on defense or offense, and might end up having more of an impact than you feel like they are initially. Reed Blankenship, I would put into that category. 3 years, $24.75 million. There's a lot to like about this signing because, look, they're not paying him like one of the best defensive backs in the league. He had a bit of a down year last year, but has done some really good things in Philadelphia, including on a Super Bowl winning defense, but was also voted a team captain in Philadelphia. People really respect him. He plays like a swarm type of player. But the thing that really intrigues me about Blankenship is that he's coming from a defense in Philadelphia led by Vic Fangio, where Vic asks a lot of his defensive backs in terms of their shifting assignments and responsibilities and how they tweak things and put a big mental load on the safeties especially. And they ask those guys to do a lot in kind of a directly opposite strategy of what D'Amico likes to do, which is keep it as simple as possible and go out and play football. And I'm really excited to see what Reed Blankenship looks like when he's surrounded by 4 guys who have all been playing in this system for a couple years at least, and really what Reed Blankenship can perhaps tap into. And it also takes some of the pressure off of Kalen Bullock. If let's not even say that Blankenship is an upgrade, okay? Even though I think he is over a lot of the guys that played there last year at that other safety position, but just by having some consistency. I mean, Bullock was having to play next to a different guy on average about every 3 or 4 games last year. So Bullock, as he continues to improve and grow into that role, when you're a deep center field safety especially, the neck up is huge. And everything that you learn, the reps that you see, the lessons you learn, all of those things, he's going to continue to get better and better as long as he stays healthy. I love the concept of Reed Blankenship next to him for a full regular season in the playoffs. So I like that move a lot. And I know we'd rather be spending that money on the interior offensive line right now. But that was the one big question mark on defense is all right, how are you going to address this revolving door at the I hate saying strong safety because it's never as clear cut anymore these days, but let's call it strong safety. Trent Brown, 1 year, up to $7 million, addressing your offensive line. As I said earlier, I don't think they plan on him I don't think they want to go into the season saying, hey, Trent Brown's our starter at right tackle, no matter what, unless they also have somebody like either a Braden Smith and some promising young rookies and whoever is going to be signed in free agency. You know, the Texans reportedly were in on Elgin Jenkins. let's just call him Jenkins, the interior offensive lineman from the Packers who ended up going to the Browns. I was a little upset that the Texans didn't land him because it was a relatively reasonable contract. I want to say 2 years, $24 million or something thereabouts. It seemed like something the Texans might have been willing to pay. Maybe he just chose Cleveland over Texans for an equal offer. I'm gonna be saying in your face all season long if it doesn't work out for him there with Cleveland. Foster Moreau, another supporting move, signed yesterday. I wouldn't normally be super excited about signing a backup tight end, except that, man, he's a good run blocker and a good blocker in general by tight end standards. So what do we love about Dalton Schultz? We love his productivity. I like that he is swarm natured. It, like, when, especially late in the season and in the playoffs, he gets really grimy. He breaks tackles, he bulldozes people. He is a willing blocker. He's just not that good at it. And that's what happens sometimes. I think he continues to try to improve as a blocker, but that's never going to be his calling card. When you can pair him up with a guy like Foster Moreau that can put defenses in a bind. All right, they got two tight ends on the field. Moreau's had a couple of seasons where he's had somewhere between 30 and 40 receptions in a year. It's not like he's completely inept as a pass catcher. But you put defenses into a bind of, okay, are they going to run the ball or are they going to pass the ball? Hopefully this also means that the Texans have moved on from the days of relying so heavily on 6 offensive lineman packages. That was just when the Texans would use 6 offensive linemen last year, it wasn't like they were doing it because they were a rolling ball of butcher knives that couldn't be stopped when they did that. It was an emergency measure to make up for the fact that they had a hard time run blocking and they weren't all that great in pass protection. I know they improved, but they weren't incredible in pass protection. And when you're not lethal running the ball with 6 offensive linemen, but you're also taking an eligible wide receiver off the field. I mean, technically Blake Fisher was eligible, but not really. Then you're hamstringing your offense, and you're just trying to make do with the guys and resources you have. Hopefully Foster Moreau takes care of that. One of the other transactions that I included in these 16 transactions is the Dalton Schultz extension, 1-year extension for $12.6 million. I am 100% cool with that. I think it ends up putting him and made him the 10th highest paid tight end at the time after a couple free agency contracts and some restructures and extensions around the league. He'll probably end up paid like the 15th or 16th highest paid tight end, which based on his production is something that he deserves. He also spoke very glowingly about the culture in Houston, how much he loves being here when he was on the Jim Rome show the other day. You can check on my personal YouTube channel. I will probably do a reaction to a few of those clips a little bit later on. Seth Payne Show, if you search it. And those are the supporting moves. Feel pretty good about all of those. The quiet depth moves. We'll do this real rapid fire. The first one, and I hesitated to put this into quiet depth moves. I thought maybe I should have put it up into the supporting moves, tier 2 of all of these. But Logan Hall, former University of Houston football player who had been playing in Tampa, was a second-round pick by Tampa for 4 years. He comes over to Houston on a 2-year, $7 million contract. I think most of that is guaranteed, which is a pretty nice, sweet little deal for a guy that had been a consistent starter, but not as much of an impact player as people in Tampa wanted. I think there's a really good chance this ends up being a better scheme fit for him. And you just flat out, we've seen this. The Texans have a really good knack for getting the absolute most out of interior defensive linemen. And I think Logan Hall is that type of player where he hasn't quite capitalized on just how big and athletic he is. He's lanky. He's like 6'7", 288 pounds. So when I say he's big, I mean, he is rangy. He's a tall guy. A lot of people wonder whether, hey, would he be better suited as a 4-3 defensive end? I think with the Texans, he's probably going to play mostly on the interior. We know they rotate those guys through, but in run situations and in certain packages, he can totally play defensive end. It'll be interesting to see how D'Amico and Matt Burke and Rod Wright, the defensive line coach, choose to use him. But Rod Wright has done such a great job working with these defensive linemen and getting the most out of Tommy Togiai. I mean, Tim Settle ends up getting a really nice contract with Washington, and I think a deal that wasn't out there for him a couple of years ago when he got to the Texans. He put his best foot forward playing in this scheme. Sheldon Rankins, I think we've seen he's had a really good run of it here. Of the available interior defensive line free agents this year, Sheldon Rankins had second most pressures of I think John Franklin Myers was the only interior defensive lineman that had more pressures than Sheldon Rankins last year. So he's doing good things in this system with this coaching. I think we end up seeing the same thing out of Logan Hall. So I'm actually really excited to see Logan Hall come back to Houston. I know he's excited to be back in Houston, and I think really playing on this defense. I've said many times before, if I were a free agent defensive lineman, especially an interior defensive lineman, and I wasn't happy with the offers I was getting, I would take a Greyhound straight to Houston, and 2 years later, I fly out on a Learjet, because that's what D'Amico does. He gets these guys paid, either remaining with the Texans or going on elsewhere to other teams. Naquan Jones, we'll stick on the defensive line, 1 year, $2 million. I thought he did some nice things when he was here at the very end of last season in the playoffs, as a late season signing, and as those defensive tackles were it was like a Civil War battlefield out there for defensive tackles. It was like we were putting one on IR every couple of games. So it was nice to have Naquan Jones, very affordable contract. We'll see what the upside is with him. EJ Speed, 2 years, $10 million. I think that's the right price for a guy that was your third linebacker, played when you're in your base 4-3 package, did some really good work on special teams. Last year, the Texans got him for about $4 million plus incentives. This year, they upped the ante a little bit, and I think it's a classic situation where he's more valuable to the Texans than he might be to other teams out there because of his familiarity, but they didn't break the bank for a guy that probably isn't going to get in on the field a whole bunch, barring injuries to Henry To'oTo'o or Azeez Al-Shaair. MJ Stewart re-signed with the Texans. Feels like he's been with the Texans for like 2 decades now, but it's really actually less than that. But a reliable backup that can play multiple positions, help you out on special teams, all of that. That's a nice non-marquee, non-attention grabbing headline, but it's nice to have him back. When it comes to the specialists, you did not come to the right place for in-depth specialist breakdowns. Kaimi Fairbairn is notable because he signs a 2-year, $13 million extension. I think we all love Kaimi, right? Kaimi's been everything that you want in a kicker, which is to say that I don't complain or whine about him all that much, and he came up big a few times this year. When you have an offense that's one of the worst red zone offenses in the league, it's nice to have a Kaimi Fairbairn on your side. So that is the league-leading contract for kickers, or at least it was when Kaimi signed it. So one thing we know about Nick, he's not afraid to reset the market as long as it's to a guy that he knows he can trust and it's going to keep working hard, et cetera, because he's soon eclipsed by somebody else. You know, Derek Stingley already is out of the top 5 amongst highest-paid cornerbacks. And that's something that Nick would have anticipated. He sees where the market's going. He's going to waste a whole bunch of time if they really like a guy. All right, we'll pay him what he's worth, and hope we trust that he's going to be consistent. And 2 years down the line, it's going to be a bargain contract. Sometimes I would worry that means your GM isn't negotiating hard enough. But the thing is, the Texans, Nick follows this strategy with a lot of the guys like Jalen Petrie that they really like. And yet he remains in a good cap situation in future years. The Will Anderson extension will test this, obviously, potentially a CJ Stroud extension at some point in these next 2 years. And then Kai Kroger, look, the Texans trade for Kai Kroger, the punter, rookie last year, unimpressive numbers. He was like 28th in average net punt and everything. I don't know if this is who the kicker will be in September. I don't know if they see something in him that perhaps just didn't show up on film. I'm not going to get all bent out of shape. I'm not going to cry a million tears for Tommy Townsend either. Look, I'm a man that's watched Shane Leckler punt for the Texans. All right. That's my standard. You come in here, boot the ball a country mile, and then go bass fishing later on in the afternoon. That's what I want to see out of my punter. All right. But I will not punt on giving the grade, the midterm grade. Let's remember there's work to be done, but I have to grade them based on the first 4 days of pre-free agency and free agency. Let's call it free agency week. And I'm struggling with what to do about the fact that they have not addressed the interior offensive line other than re-signing Ed Ingram at this point in free agency. And they've made stabs, or at least had conversations reportedly with a couple of guys out there. That's the one thing that's giving me hope, is that I don't think they're going to completely neglect it before they head to the draft. I think there will be a veteran in here. But at this midterm period, when we're giving out the midterm grades, they haven't done it yet. So I'm vacillating between a B+, a B-, and a C+. So a B+ to a C- without having addressed the interior offensive line. I actually like that they've been pretty conservative in a lot of their signings, as we all know the cautionary tale of, man, the teams that are super aggressive in free agency very usually don't see the payoff during the regular season. So I like that they're biding their time. There's still guards and centers out there in free agency. As of the time of this recording, they haven't signed any of them yet. So right now, with chance for a revision later, I'm giving the Texans a C+, but it's about as good as I've felt about a C+ in a while. And part of that is because we still have the draft to come too. I know we don't trust Casario's ability to draft offensive linemen. I'm using Ariante Ursary as a large human being that I'm grasping onto for hope in that, because I think Ariante Ursary is going to be good, and that is a Nick Caserio draft pick. But I think they end up picking somebody up in the draft. So right now, C+, but don't be ashamed of it. Don't be afraid to take the report card home and have your mom sign it. You have to forge your signature. If the Texans are more aggressive on the interior offensive line and make another couple of smart pickups, this can very easily be revised up into the B category. B's and C's add up to degrees. So one of the seniors on the football team told me my freshman year when I was upset about not getting enough A's, and he set me straight. What a great mentor. Thanks, Bob Garvey. Hey, oh, yeah, and thank you to Bleav for sponsoring the Bleav in Texans podcast. Please, if you're listening on Apple, give us a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment below. What are your grades for this free agency period so far? Thanks, everybody.